L'chaim, everybody, l'chaim. I didn't forget. We did forget one book. Okay, we'll survive. Welcome, everybody. We're working on Parsha Chukat. That's going to be, it starts in chapter 19, but we're going to start with chapter 20 tonight. And we're dealing with the verse. It's verse 2 in chapter 20. Chapter 20 of Numbers. So, it says like this. It's really verse 2, okay. So the children of Israel, the whole assembly, arrived at the wilderness of Tzin in the first month, and the people settled in Kadesh. Miriam died there, and she was buried there. Before we go to the next verse, I'll read in Hebrew. V'yavo b'nei Yisrael kol ha'edah midbar Tzin b'chodesh harishon v'yeshev ha'am b'kadesh v'tamat sham Miriam. Miriam died there, v'tikaber sham, and she was buried there. Very important. And the next verse is Lo ha'amayim le'edah, and there was no water for the congregation. Now we know that this is the point in time, this is the 39th year that we're in the desert. We had a rock that followed us around in the desert and provided water for us for almost 40 years. Miriam dies, and now all of a sudden there's no water. Do you guys see that? Miriam dies, and all of a sudden there's no water. So there's obviously a very strong connection between Miriam dying and the fact that we don't have any water. Of course, this then falls into the story where Moses ends up hitting the rock and not speaking to the rock, but we're not going to go there tonight. Okay, so we want to know what exactly, is this a punishment? And anyway, when we talk about punishment, what is the word punishment mean anyway? I'm sure in English it probably means something very different than what it means in Hebrew. When we think of the word onesh, Hebrew for punishment is onesh, we always think that it's midah keneged midah. It's measure for measure. And why? It's prophetic. God wants to speak to us. God wants us to do tshuva. He wants us to retract, to return from what we're doing wrong, from the mistakes that we're making. Therefore, the onesh, as we'll call it, is not really a punishment in the sense of how we think about in America, or in English, or in Western society or culture, but rather it's a sign from God. It's prophetic that He's sending this to you as a perfectly measured out message, so that you should return, so you should become cognizant and aware of what you're doing wrong. So the Kliyakar begins by saying there was no water for the congregation outside ha'onish chasru hamayim. From the aspect of an onish, we'll use the word punishment, or maybe the word penalty, or the word lesson. But we understand it to mean measure for measure. There was a lack of water. Why? He claims the fishlo hispiduha karoi, because the Jewish people did not eulogize. Hesped is a eulogy, but it's more than just a eulogy. It's expression of loss, whether it's from crying, to sitting on the floor, to ripping your clothes, to having just a feeling of that which is no longer with you. So because it was a lack, she was not eulogized properly, and he proves it. Ki b'Moshe the Aaron, both. When Moshe and Aaron died, you know what it says in the Torah regarding them? The Yithchu otam b'nei Yisrael, that the Jewish people cried for them. It actually tells us the Jewish people cried when they died. The Kan, here, it doesn't say that they cried for her. Lo ne'emar v'yivchu otah. They didn't cry for her. In fact, the verse says, v'tamat sham, v'takaber sham. She died there, and she was buried there. That's it. That's the whole story. Ki b'makom shamneta, in the very place that she died, Sham tehei kvurata la'altar. There she was buried immediately. And when someone gets buried immediately without any words, the nishkacha kamet milev, they actually forgot her as a dead person from their own hearts. V'lo hirgishu behadera klal. They didn't feel the emptiness, the vacuum. The word eder, ayin daled reish, is that vacuum, that emptiness. They didn't feel the loss at all. Al came, therefore, as of measure for measure, nichsaru lehem hamayim, became a lacking for them of water. Right? A certain amount of appreciation for 39 years. And the truth is, we're going to see that when Miriam, she's one of the, I forget what they call them, the maidens that helped bring birth to the children while they were in Egypt. She was the one who fed these children so they could survive. She was a balas chesed. She was full of kindness. So here you're talking about for 39 years they benefited from the water because of her. You know, we call the be'er is the rock, or it literally means spring. The rock that caused forth water to pour forth in the desert was called Be'er Miriam, the well of Miriam. I'm sure you probably heard that in English. Kedei sheyedu lemafreya shehabe'er haya b'schut Miriam. The reason the water was lacking for them, in order that they should become informed, in order to let them know. Limafreya means retroactively, now, after the fact, that the Be'er, that well, was in the merit of Miriam. And Chazal tell us in Gemara Moed Katan on 28a, there's, you know what the word smichut, we use it in English, we say a juxtaposition. There is one called coincidence, right? We're not using the word coincidence, we're using a reason actually why one parsha, one subject is juxtaposed, is put up against, or followed by, or precedes a particular paragraph. So in Gemara Moed Katan, it tells us Shnismicha mitata la parshas para, the reason why that the death of Miriam is juxtaposed to the parsha of the paraduma. What is the paraduma? That is the red heifer. That is where it is slaughtered like, there's certain similarities to an offering. It's not really an offering, as we will see, but it has enough similarities to an offering that it's going to be. And what does an offering do? An offering atones. Are you listening to this? Offerings atone. So it's telling us, ready for this? You have to be sitting down to hear this. Ma hakarbanos mechaprim, just as the offerings in the temple make atonement. You know what I'm about to tell you. Af mitat hatzadikim mikaperet. So too, the death of righteous people cause atonement, cause whatever, even the word mechaper, what is chaper? It's to cover the sin. It's somehow to remedy the sin. Lama nismechu dafka lapara. So the Kliyakar really asks, he doesn't understand exactly why that you have this juxtaposition specifically to a para, after explaining that just like the korbanos atone, so too the death of the righteous atone. Guess what? Ki be'emet ain't a korban. The truth is, the para aduma, that red heifer, is not really a korban. Why? Because korbanos, the offerings, are not allowed to be, you can't do many of the services outside of the temple. They have to be slaughtered within the temple. The blood is usually poured onto the altar. Obviously, that's in the temple. Whether it's burnt or eaten, it has to be done in the temple. None of that's true. But guess what? There is a name for it. Rak ma shenetzinu shekora katuv chatas. Unbelievable. Wait till you hear the word chatas. I think we learned this before at some point. We only find one comparison, is that the fact that this, I'm not going to call it korban, but the paraduma is called a chatas. A chatas is a sin offering. It acts as a atonement for sin. It's actually called a chatas. And you can find that in Numbers 19, verse 9. If you go, did I do it right? I might have put the wrong thing. I said to go to 22 on the short sheet. What do we have here? I don't think I put it here. Okay, my bad. But if you go to, we say it's 19 verse 9. So verse 19 verse 9 says, I do have it somewhere in the source sheet, I just didn't put it. A pure man shall gather the ash of the cow and place it outside the camp in a pure place. For the assembly of Israel, it shall remain as a safekeeping. For water sprinkling, it is for purification. Now listen to the Hebrew. It is for purification. In the Hebrew it says, Lemeinida hatasi. The word chatas, which is very strange because that name, that word, is associated with sin. And yet the same word, chatas, which is associated with sin, is the same word for purification. So he says, okay, now he's about to bring in a famous medrash. Now I did bring one of the source sheets. It looks like this. I believe it looks like this. Anyway, this is from the medrash, and it's a famous medrash, and it basically says that just like, what's the principal purpose of the para aduma? And remember, if the principal purpose of the para aduma is X, and the claim here is the death of the righteous also act. Now you got to remember, it's plural here, so we're not talking about one individual in the world is doing this. We're talking about every generation. It could be thousands of people. It could be us. We are acting in the place if we are tzaddikim. And God, then when we pass on, this is what happens. So, we see like this. Just like the para. Now the para is an adult cow, right? The red heifer has to be at least 12 months old. 12 months. It comes to clean up the feces of her son. And who's her son? The egel. And egel is a calf. Meaning that the para aduma is coming to clean up the sin for her son, which is the golden calf. So too, hatzadekes. So too, the righteous people. And this, we're talking about Miriam here, so he's mentioning a woman. So too, a righteous woman. Im kolchai, who's the mother of all living things. B'misasa mikanachat tzoat toloteha. Her death comes to clean up the feces of her progeny. Okay, he's just laying the groundwork for what he's about to go into. He's now going to tell us the virtues and the advantages of having righteous people, not only while they're alive, but also what types of benefits they do for us even after they are gone. Smicha zu mevi'im b'hamidrashim ba'arba makamos. Now he brings and he says that this medrash, this type of lesson, is brought in 4 different places. So on this page of the medrash, I just want you to see it's a real medrash, right? Nobody's making it up here. So it says like this. This is in Yud Bet. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Avina, mipnei ma nismecha parshat nisus Miriam. For what purpose is there a juxtaposition of the parsha of the death of Miriam, which we just saw in Numbers chapter 20, verse 1, le'efa para, to the dust, the ashes of the para, el lamam milame, to teach you, shem she'efa para nechaper, just as the ashes of this of the red heifer atones, kach mitat hatzadikim mekaperet. So too, the death of the righteous also atone. Rabbi Yudan mibnei ma nismichu misas Aaron. Now, what about the juxtaposition of the death of Aaron to the breaking of the tablets? If you look in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 6, you can see it. It mentions that Moses should carve out for himself the second tablets, and a few verses down, you see that it mentions Aaron dies. So why did Moses need to carve out for himself a second set of tablets? The verse says, because you smashed them. So after it mentions that Moses smashed the tablets, then Aaron dies. So there's a juxtaposition to teach us what? That it's difficult. Obviously, nothing's too difficult for God. But try to use your imagination. That this is difficult for God, that it's difficult, the difficulty of the death of Aaron was as if, whatever difficulty there was, by the breaking of the tablets. Okay, there's a lot of meforshim on the side of this page that have probably answered a lot of the questions we'll have on it. But let's just continue. Rabbi Chia bar Abba be'echad b'nisan mesu banav shel Aaron. Lama maskim yisafim b'yom kippurim. So if we know that Nadav Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, they died on the 1st of Nisan, which is not even close on the calendar. It's the opposite of Yom Kippur. Mamish, the complete opposite, right? So if you read that chapter over there, you'll see that Yom Kippur is mentioned right away. So all the laws of Yom Kippur are mentioned specifically. So why is that? Right, in order to teach you, just like Yom Kippur. What is Yom Kippur? It's the Day of Atonement. Just as the day itself. You realize the day itself atones for us. Of course, we do tshuva, so that's going to be a whole question also on the side. What part do we have to do to acquire this atonement? Is it a free-for-all? Or is there effort on our part? It seems like to all the meforshim there has to be something we do. Okay, so where did I leave off? And where do we know that the day of Yom Kippur itself? Well, you look in Vayikra in Leviticus 16:30. It says Ki b'yom hazeh. It actually says it's the day itself. Ki b'yom hazeh. It's the day itself is Yichaper Lechem, L'Tayeschem. The words of the verse says it's the day itself. And where do we know where the death of the tzaddikim mekaperes? Minayin shem l'sisan shel tzaddikim mekaperes? So that you can look in Shmuel Bet, 2 Samuel 21:14, and we're not going to go into that. But you see so far already that this is absolutely amazing, right? Because many people are of the opinion that it's a Christian idea, and the truth is that whatever truth there is in Christianity, many of it is not true, a lot of fake news, but whatever is true comes originally from the revelation of Sinai. So now we're going to continue on in the Kliyakar. He said, "Usmichut zu." Oh, I also thought of something. If anybody ever accused me of being a Christian, I thought about it. I'm going to say, oh yeah. JC, he's prophesized the Torah. I know all about it. Yeah, just look up Deuteronomy chapter 13 and 18. You know. Anyway, I had a big discussion with somebody on my YouTube channel about it. Okay. So back to this piece. Where smichot zu midim hamidrashim ba'arba makomos. The truth is, I just read that one medrash that brought these 4 places. He starts off with Aleph. Smichot mitat b'nei Aaron liyom ha'kippurim mechaper. Right, the juxtaposition between the death of the sons of Aaron to Yom Kippur works as an atonement. Also, the smichos of Miriam and Para, our parsha, that Miriam and the Para are mentioned in close proximity, and just as the Para is mechaper, so too the death of Miriam was mechaperet. The smichos of Aaron to the big day Kahuna Nechaprim. So this we didn't really go into, but there's an idea if you read in, like in our verse, in our chapter, verse 26. Okay, so you can see also that there is the death of Aaron, and the verse before, or earlier in the verse, talks about the begodim, the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Each different part of the Kohen's dress atoned for different sins of the people, whether it was for thought, whether it was for action, whether it was for speech, inadvertent sins of different types. Okay, and you can find that in Perek Elu Megalti. Fine. And in Parshas Ekev, there's a smichut, which we just went through, of the mitzvahs Aaron l'shvir saluchos, the death of Aaron to the breaking of the tablets. You can find that in Deuteronomy 10, verse 6. But you go back a few verses earlier, you'll see God tells Moses to carve out the second tablets because you smashed the first ones, and then you see Aaron dies. And that the lesson here is shekasha misa tzadikim k'shvir saluchos, that the difficulty of the death of the tzadikim is like the breaking of the tablets. And not only that, listen to this: l'fi shemin kol tzadik yagil livnei doro arba mini ta'olot, that emanating from each righteous person reaches or grasps the people of that generation, at least, he mentions four advantages, four positive things that come to the people who are alive, left behind. Ready? The first one is Shekol ha'olam nizon b'schuto. While he's still alive, the whole world benefits. All the food is coming down as if God only wants to feed this one person who's, like studying Torah day and night, and such a tzaddik, such a righteous person, and we all benefit from his nourishing himself, even if all he's eating is carobs. I mean, you ever eat carobs? They break your teeth. I mean, it's good when it's already finely ground and you can mix it with a little sugar, and bake with it, or make a chocolate milk for the kids or something. But that the whole world is actually nourishing on his account, on his merit. The Gemara Brachot 17b mentions Kol ha'olam nizon b'shvil chanina b'ni. Okay, that God says the whole world was being unbelievable. Do you know that? This is what I heard today. I always knew it, but it hit me that the Amoraim, we're not talking about the Tanaim or the prophets. The prophets we already know could do this. That the Tanaim who wrote the Mishnah could do this. But ready for this, the Amoraim, the people, if someone's name is mentioned in the Gemara, they could. Doesn't mean they had to. They could resurrect the dead. Can you imagine? Resurrect the dead. Anyway, I heard amazing stories about what different times in the Gemara where the Amoraim did such. Anyway. And then we go on. I'm just going to skip a few sentences here. It's interesting because who are Moshe and Aaron called in the Song of Songs? In Song of Songs, chapter 4, verse 5, the verse says, Shnei Shadayich. Now, if you go to the it's on page 4, number 25. So if you go, it says the ArtScroll translation. Let's just read that first. It says Moses and Aaron. Now Moses and Aaron's name are not mentioned in the verse. Moses and Aaron, your two sustainers, are like two fawns, twins of the gazelle, who graze their sheep in rose-like bounty. Now you can read the ArtScroll commentary on that, which I suggest, but everyone else translate it literally. And even in the ArtScroll, you'll see there's a place translated literally. Shnei Shadayich means the two breasts. And what do they two breasts do? They're the ones that sustain, your two sustainers. They feed, right? They nurse. And who are they? That's Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron, the pillars. The pillars, literally, the pillars are the sustainers. And you can see that in Rashi on that Parsha, on that verse. So too now, in the Gemara Tainus, it mentions, Shebeschut Miriam hoya lehem habe'er. It was on account of the merit of Miriam that we had water for 39 years. And not only that, Shahaya Maspik Liyisrael Kartzarchem. She provided to the Jewish people all their needs. First of all, we didn't need to shower for 39 years. Can you imagine? 40 years. Our shoes didn't wear out. You didn't have to change your socks. You didn't have to go to the bathroom. So you didn't sweat. There was no excess from the food that we ate, because the only food that we really ate was the man. So it was spiritual angel food that got totally absorbed. I can't describe it because I don't really fully comprehend it. But they had no need. So the water was for drinking, and the truth is, amazing vort. Maybe I'll stop here to tell you. Main Meriva, the Rogachover asked, why is it called Main Meriva? Main Meriva means the waters of strife. This is only the last year. He says like this, that there's specific laws of a mikveh. Mikveh is like the baptism thing, right? So when a woman is in a state of nida, so it's about once a month, she goes to the mikveh and then she can be with her husband. Unless she's pregnant or nursing, but she doesn't have her menstrual cycle. Now, there are laws about a regular in-house mikveh that came through rainwater and was collected, but it has to be still. It can't be moving. And then there's a spring, which obviously is moving. So there's different laws. Now, if that regular mikveh had a hole in it, and that hole caused the water to be moving, obviously if there's a hole, the water will be moving. If you had enough water, obviously, so you couldn't go into that mikveh because it's not supposed to be moving. So let's say you plug it up with something. So now, there's different opinions, but let's say you plugged it up with something that should not have been something that is makabel tumah, something that accepts a contamination, will then affect the water, as opposed to using something that does not affect the contaminant, does not makabel and affect the possibility of contamination. What ended up happening was when God said to Moses, take the staff, we all know that Moses was a very humble person, but the Rogachover says that he overstepped and was too humble. And he took the staff from before Hashem. What is before Hashem? The Aaron HaKodesh, the ark. And inside the ark is Aaron's staff. Now the difference between Moses' staff and Aaron's staff, I know we spoke last week about Aaron's staff being dry wood, but imagine Moses' staff being dry wood and Aaron's staff being petrified that it turned into some kind of marble, some kind of stone. So when Moses overreacted and was over humble, which there's many claims to what his sin was. So apparently, according to Rabbi Aaron, that was his sin. He took the staff. He should have taken his own. He should have believed in himself and taken his own staff. Instead, he put himself below where he should have been, and he took Aaron's staff, thinking that's the more important staff, but that was makabel tumah. So since it was makabel tumah, and when you hit the rock, in other words, what else did they need the water for? For the mikveh. So it's called waters of strife, because if a woman can't go to the mikveh, so what happens when a man and a woman, they get a little bit of a squabble, and there's I don't want to say, we call it makeup sex. You go to the mikveh and everything's fine. Everything starts over again. So unfortunately, for the last year, according to Rogachover, none of the Jewish women were able to go to the mikveh, and that's why it's called May Mariva, the waters of strife.
Whoa! Please.
Anyway, that's a side thing. Okay, crazy, right? That's the Rogachover.
I didn't start with it.
So it was in the merit of Miriam, and she supplied all of our needs. And that's why there's the juxtaposition of her death to this cow, which is the mother of the calf, which comes to fix. Remember that medrash we spoke about, that the mother cleans up after the child, right? Every mother can understand this, and every parent can really try to understand this, that the mother comes to fix that which needs fixing from the child. So that's all the first side. Okay, the second thing that a righteous person does, they melamdam halahoil derech Hashem mitzvahs. They teach, the righteous people teach us how, all the benefits of serving God, of the ways of God and following His mitzvahs. That's why that it's compared, the death of a righteous person is compared to the breaking of the tablets. When it's breaking the tablets, it's like losing the Torah. They are like a living Torah scroll. Okay? They're there to teach us the way of God, which is what the Torah does. And the third thing is their magen in their merit. Zchuto, magen katzel ukabeged asui lahatzil makor b'cham. He uses two languages here. That in their merit, there's a guard, like shade, and a garment. They act as a guard against, well, let's use that because he says, to save us from heat and cold. So the sail would probably save us from the heat, and the garment would save us from the cold. Clear as mud? And therefore, when they die, sar tzilam, which is interesting because, in other words, you would think it could mean when they die, then the shade leaves. No. Tzilam, the same word for shade, shadow, refuge, is the same word for the image that God created us in. God created us in His image. His image is a shadow, right? When you put your hand up and there's light, sun, any kind of light, so it's an image, but there's nothing really there, but it's there. That's what our soul is in the image of God. We are God-like. We're not God. You couldn't call that shadow the hand. It's the shadow of the hand. So it's the tzel, which is shade or shadow. Tselem is the image and likeness of God. So anyway, the image and likeness of God that we have is free will. Okay? Anyway, that's a whole story in itself. And therefore, listen to this. Harei heim arumi mikol michseh. They actually became naked. In other words, when Aaron died, or let's say Miriam dies, when the tzaddik dies, what happens? They become naked from any covering. And listen to this verse. If you go in our chapter 20, verse 29, it says, V'yiru kol ha'eda ki gava Aaron. Now, it actually says, you have a yud with a tseireh. So you go into the verse, I said it's 29, chapter 20, verse 29. Here we are. So it doesn't have the tseireh. It's the yiru kol ha'eda, which you would translate as they did, that when the entire assembly saw that Aaron had died. But with the tseireh and the yud, which is there, the yera'u, it means they were seen. Exposed. When Aaron died, they were exposed. When Aaron died, they were exposed, meaning the beged, the covering, the clothing. They were
cloak of invisibility lost.
The cloak of invisibility was lost. Hainu hasarat anan, the clouds of glory, hanimsho labeged, which are compared to clothing, was removed. You follow what we're talking about here? Zes smichul lebigdei kuna, and that's the juxtaposition to death of Aaron with the special clothing of the priesthood. And the fourth benefit, the fourth attribute, shehu mechaper aleim b'misoso, that the tzaddik causes atonement through his death, and that's where we see the smichul b'yom kippurim.
Beautiful.
It's right?
It's beautiful.
Now, on a very practical level, when someone dies, a righteous person dies, and you feel the loss, right? Someone eulogizes. Someone gets up there and speaks about his life and how he used his abilities properly, and all the stories about him, you're hearing about, and how do you feel about yourself? You know that you are lacking. You have so far to go. You know that's called tshuva. In other words, forget the metaphysical and the mystical for a second. What does it help when such a person dies, that you realize you realize how mortal you are? If they're so righteous and they die, right, and they lived, they actually used their free will, and they became more godlike, right? How far? What do I need to do to become closer, to fulfill my own mission? Not to be like them. God's not going to say, "Why were you Aaron? How come you weren't like Moses?" He's going to say, "Scott, why aren't you like Scott? You have to fulfill," right? And Mayor and Kathy and everyone else is sitting here, right? Everybody, why didn't you become who you were supposed to be? So, there's a halacha that if you were faced with going to either a wedding or to a funeral, and all the parameters are the same, the variables are the same, it's not a relative, whatever, you should be going to the funeral first. That's going to bring you to the everlasting life, because that's going to atone for your sin by going and listening to the eulogy. Okay, so that's on a very practical level. Obviously, on a very mystical level, I'm sure that it's also true, but just know the difference between Judaism and Christianity. This is not a pillar of our faith. This is just a fact of life, that righteous people, they suffer in this world, right? The Jewish people suffer in this world, and it's all there's some advantage, okay? It's not all for naught, and for a righteous person, when he dies, there is some residue effect on the generation. And he says, Kal lahavin.